Okay, so this is my bio. Hopefully everyone has seen it previously, so nothing new here. Today we're going to be talking about the Old Louisville neighborhood, which is near downtown. So where is the Old Louisville neighborhood? Well, you can see downtown Louisville up there in the upper part, and then between York Street and basically the University of Louisville, and then over to Interstate 65, over to 6th Street. So it's basically just south of downtown Louisville is where the Old Louisville neighborhood resides. Now then, how did it develop? So this is a map of Louisville in 1832. That's 23 years ago. 123, 200. Yeah, it's 200, almost 200 years ago, if I get that right. About 200 years ago, the city only extended down to Broadway, not very far, just about 8 blocks or so from the river. And Broadway was originally known as Prather Street, but now we know it as Broadway. But anyways, south of Broadway was pretty much just farmland and forest. Not many houses down south of the Broadway area. But if you see here, I have an item called Cuthbert Bullitt Property, a little red square there. I'll talk about that. What is that? Well, Cuthbert Bullitt had a cabin where Central Park is now in the Old Louisville area. So Cuthbert Bullitt, who was a ancestor of the Bullitt family of Bullitt County, Oxmoor Farm and all that. Cuthbert Bullitt was a famous settler of Louisville, and he had a hunting cabin, if you can believe it, in this area where Central Park is. And in the 1860s, they moved that hunting cabin down to St. James Court area. And that's what it looks like today. I've not actually been inside it to see exactly how that hunting cabin was built. It could be a log cabin as far as I know. It probably is a log cabin built in 1837. But the Cuthbert Bullitt cabin, supposedly, and again I've not verified this, but exists there on St. James Court at 1418 St. James Court. So again, this area of where Old Louisville is now, it once was a forest and agricultural area that you could actually go out and hunt animals on. So here's an 1865 map of Louisville, and I have highlighted where the Cuthbert Bullitt cabin is located. But you can see now how Louisville has developed and grown out to that area. It's still somewhat a rural area. There's still farms in the South Louisville area there, but it's not as developed as it is today. What transformed Old Louisville into the neighborhood that it is today is a streetcar line that ran from downtown Louisville out to Central Park along 4th Street. And it was operated by the DuPont family. They bought this streetcar line that went from 4th and Walnut, which is now Muhammad Ali, out to 4th and Oak. So that's how you got from downtown to the Old Louisville area by streetcar, and that really opened up people wanting to move south out of downtown into the Old Louisville area. I mentioned the DuPonts. They not only helped encourage people to settle in the Old Louisville neighborhood area, but they were very much entrepreneurs, and they operated a lot of streetcar systems, not only in Louisville, but regionally. I think they went down as far down as New Orleans, up to Detroit, throughout the Midwest. They owned many streetcar systems, the DuPonts did. You got Biederman DuPont and Alfred DuPont, who are depicted here. And if it wasn't for the Louisville DuPonts, the DuPont Corporation, which is based in Wilmington, Delaware, wouldn't be what it is today. Back in the early 1900s, the DuPont company, which was a gunpowder company back then, the DuPont family was going to sell it to one of their competitors and get out of the just sell the whole DuPont company. Well, when the relatives in Wilmington told their Louisville relatives and said, hey, we're going to sell this place, our Louisville DuPonts said, no you don't, and they went back to Wilmington and took over the DuPont company and made it into the chemical giant that it is today. So our Louisville DuPonts, through their railway systems and other things that they did, became very good at entrepreneurship and running companies, and so they were able to transform DuPont into what it is today. Just a little sidetrack there. Pardon the pun there with streetcars being sidetracked. Here, Stuart Robinson, he was a noted religious figure here in Louisville back in the mid-1800s. And he bought the Cuthbert Bullitt property in the late 1860s. So Stuart Robertson, who was a minister, purchased the Cuthbert Bullitt property, and he built this house here. It's called the Robinson House, built in 1868. This was built, here are some interior photographs of it. There's a nice photograph of it, and it was built where Central Park is today in downtown Louisville, or in the Old Louisville neighborhood. So if you notice the house back there and the people walking around, look at this fountain here. That fountain, believe it or not, still exists to this day. It is located at the Edison Center, which is just to the west of Old Louisville on South 7th Street there. And I have a little red circle there which highlights where that fountain is and where it's located. So that was the Stuart Robinson house. But the DuPonts wanted that house. So Biederman DuPont came in and bought Stuart Robinson's house. And so Biederman DuPont, of the DuPont family, lived there. And Stuart Robinson built a house across the street, across 4th Street. He built this house here, which we now know as the Landward House, but it was built at 4th and Magnolia. So, again, Stuart Robertson owned this house. Biederman DuPont went up, knocked on the door and said, hey, I love your house, can I buy it? Stuart Robinson said, sure, I'll sell it to you. And across the street he builds this, a very nice house as well, maybe even better than the one he had that he sold to DuPont. So here's what we got. So we have Central Park, the Biederman DuPont house, the Stuart Robinson house, and just to the south of that you'll see something called the Southern Exposition. And this really transformed the Old Louisville neighborhood. This was the Southern Exposition. The Southern Exposition was a sort of a national, or even more of maybe a regional exposition of Louisville manufacturing, of agricultural goods, of artwork. Anything that Louisville wanted to promote was staged here at the Southern Exposition, sort of a World's Fair, if you will. And this lasted between 1883 to 1887, for 4 years there in the early 1880s. It's one heck of a building, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
They built that in 9 months, I understand.
Really?
Don't ask them to do it today, but they were able to build this in 9 months, I understand. Very inexpensively built. So now then, the Southern Exposition, the blue square there represents that building that I just showed you. There's that building. It's right there in that blue square. But on either side of the exposition was horticultural botanical gardens. So they have horticultural gardens on either side, or botanical gardens. The red square on the right, that's where Central Park is today. And on the left side there, unfortunately, that has since been developed. But again, 2/3 of the property of the Southern Exposition was botanical gardens. And so you can see where Central Park is, where Biederman's house was there, and St. James Court. So the overall Southern Exposition, as you can see here by this diagram, ran from Park Avenue down to Hill Street, 4th Street to 6th Street. Massive area of land that the Southern Exposition held. But again, 2/3 of it was landscaped area, botanical gardens. Here was when the On August 1st, I think it was, in 1883, President Chester Arthur came to Louisville to open up the Southern Exposition. What's that?
Who designated the Southern Exposition?
Who started it or whatever?
Right.
There was a board of directors that managed it. I believe it was just basically a lot of Louisville business people came together to self-fund this thing. I don't know. It wasn't from a national perspective. It was all Louisville commerce people that promoted this. Very entrepreneurship, if you will, back in those days. Here are some views of it. You can see how that big building was. They had statuary. They had numerous booths and exhibitions, displays. Pretty impressive for the day. So now then, as noted, 2/3 of the area was landscaped. And so the Southern Exposition, when it ran its course by 1887, the Louisville leadership is like going, now what do? We had this great fair. Well, how do we do something next? Well, the leadership came together and said, you know, we've been reading about these parks up in the Northeast United States by Frederick Law Olmsted. Our people really like the gardens of the Southern Exposition. Why don't we look into building some parks here in Louisville? And so Frederick Law Olmsted, he was up in Chicago at the time doing the Chicago World's Fair, and our leadership was able to bring him down by the railroad to Louisville to give a little talk about what he's doing up in the Northeast United States. And sure enough, our Louisville leadership said, yeah, let's do some more parks here. And that's how we got our Olmsted Park system, by bringing Olmsted in here, and also the Southern Exposition, which highlighted agricultural and horticultural landscapes. So here is again that map of 1865 map of Louisville. Interesting. What you can see here though is that little blue oval. That's where the Old Louisville neighborhood is now. And that red line that you see there, that's the Louisville and Nashville Railroad, the L&N. So you had this major railroad running right by this property that is now Old Louisville. So some developers got together and said, hey, you know, we got this interstate, which is the L&N Railroad, running right by us. Why don't we put some homes along there and maybe people will buy them? Well, sure, here are some of the factories that sprung up. These factories were adjacent to the L&N, so they were next to the railroad so they can ship all their goods in and out around the country based around the L&N Railroad. You had American Standard, Avery Agricultural, Columbia Mantle, Bold Industries, and these are just four. There were dozens, maybe hundreds of these factories in this area. So again, developers are like going, gosh, that's where all the workers and the people are working. Let's put some houses nearby. And so this one developer named William Slaughter decided to develop a residential area called St. James Court. And a little residential area there. And so here you have Central Park up above. Again, that was part of the Southern Exposition. St. James Court and Belgravia Court. These were all developed by William Slaughter as a residential area. And if you look just to the west, just to the left here, you see all those factory buildings just near Old Louisville. So again, people wanted to live where they worked. So here is St. James Court, and you see the nice houses on either side. And they put a nice fountain in the center there. It's a beautiful little fountain. Nothing really historical about it. I think it was ordered out of New York City, out of a statuary company up there. But anyways, it's now been anchored there in St. James Court for many decades. Very beautiful. So we have a developer building homes there, and so a number of architects designed these beautiful homes in the Old Louisville neighborhood. One of the architectural firms is Clark and Loomis. They're one of my heroes of Louisville architecture. Charles Julian Clark and Arthur Loomis, as you see there. Here are some of the buildings commercial buildings that they built in downtown Louisville, such as the old spaghetti factory, we call it now, but it used to be Levy Brothers. They built some schools, some libraries, some churches, some very beautiful institutional buildings. But they also built some very distinctive residential buildings. Perhaps the most distinctive is this one here, Conrad Caldwell House, which is there at Magnolia and St. James Court. Here are some images of the interior. If you've not been down there, it's now a house museum. I highly recommend it. Beautiful, just beautiful. I mean, they don't build them like this anymore. See all that? Been very well preserved and maintained. Clark and Loomis did some other nice residential buildings in the Old Louisville area. Here's a few of those. They also designed this house here. It's called the Bacon House. They're at 1328 4th Street. This building here, this house, almost was demolished back in the 1970s. They wanted to tear this down for a parking lot, but fortunately it was saved and restored to a residence. Here are some interior photographs of it. But back in the 1970s, this was just all devastated. It was just ready for the bulldozer back in those days. But fortunately, some folks who believe in good preservation came in and renovated it. They put a nice kitchen in here in the lower left, or lower part there. Now this house, the Bourbon Inn Bed and Breakfast, also known as the Houston House, designed by architect Mason Murray, built in 1884. Just a spectacular building. It also was proposed to be demolished as well for a parking lot. I'll show you some. It was designed by Mason Murray. Here is some information on him and some of the buildings, beautiful buildings that he did. The First Trust Center downtown, as well as the Kenyon Building. Some other nice buildings that Mason Murray had designed. But this is some interior photographs of that Bourbon Bed and Breakfast, also called the Houston House. So beautiful. I love this fireplace. See where the glass window is? Normally that's where the chimney goes up, but actually it's designed so the chimney has two flues to it on either side of that window. The Pink Palace. There's been various stories told about the Pink Palace, how it became pink, how it was developed and all that, and I have a friend of mine that's been doing some research on it, and I won't go into what he's been doing. But one thing about the Pink Palace is it's a very thin building, it's not very deep. And so a lot of people believe it was built as a clubhouse for the men of the neighborhood. Again, I don't know if that's a true statement or not, but it was purchased in the 1920s by a women's organization who I understand, at least the myth has it, that they are the ones that painted it pink. There's some nice photographs of the Pink Palace and the interior of it. Another very beautiful building here, it's called the K-Wine House. It was built for a guy by the name of Charles Compton, and he was with the L&N Railroad. Again, the L&N Railroad was just basically almost right across the street from where Old Louisville is. So he could take his little carriage ride over. And again, you got to remember, this was before automobiles. And so they had horse and buggies. And it was an easy commute for them to go from their house here over to wherever they worked. And then it was purchased by the poet laureate of Kentucky, Madison K. Wine. And he wrote 36 books. He specialized in poems. It's a beautiful signature house on St. James Court. And it was owned by, at one point owned by a guy by the name of Malcolm Bird, and he helped start the St. James Court Art Show. And there's some images of the St. James Court Art Show, and I'll talk about that later in the program. And then it just recently was owned by another poet laureate of Kentucky, Senna Jeter Noslin. Hopefully I didn't mispronounce that too badly, but she's written a lot of poetry books. It's a beautiful house. The other house on St. James Court I want to highlight is the William Dodd house. William Dodd was an architect who designed many beautiful buildings of Louisville. Here's a little history of him. And here are some of the notable buildings that he designed and built. There he is there on the right. Some of the buildings that he built here in Louisville. The church in the upper left-hand corner I'll talk about here soon. The building, the high-rise there on the right, it's since been demolished. That was the Lincoln Washington building. And then the building in the lower left-hand corner, that building still exists, but you would not recognize it because it now looks like that. Here are some interiors of the Dodd house, architect Dodd, William Dodd. William Dodd also designed this beautiful Beaux-Arts building on 3rd Street, the Grabfelder Mansion. Spectacular building. I've been inside it, phenomenal. Dodd also was involved in designing the Ferguson Mansion here. It's now the Filson Historical Society on 3rd Street. That's pretty spectacular. Some interior photographs of it. Mason Murray built this house here for a guy by the name of Foster Thomas, but it was then owned by Morris Belknap of the Belknap Company. Some of you may have heard of Belknap Hardware. Morris Belknap was the son of the founder William Burke Belknap, and so this Belknap building is now owned by the Women's Club of Louisville, and they utilize it. And Morris Belknap's brother was William Richardson Belknap, and he owned this house here on Ormsby Avenue, just around the block from his brother Morris. So this house and the other and this house are almost back to each other. One's on Ormsby, one's on 4th Street. But that was a house by William Richardson Belknap. Belknaps, again, were involved in the Belknap Hardware Company, which was a major national company here in Louisville. They used the Ohio River and the L&N Railroad to ship all of their goods out. Just phenomenal. It was started in 1846, I want to say, and it was closed in 1986. So it lasted over 100 years. It was a phenomenal business. We now remember the Belknap family by the campus at U of L, which is known as the Belknap campus. When William Richardson Belknap died, he left money for educational purposes, and some of that money was used to buy the campus for U of L, and it also helped build this school, the old Belknap School, which is in the Belknap neighborhood. Here is the big transitional point in Louisville history for the old Louisville neighborhood. On October 4th, 1898, this contraption started roaming around the streets of Louisville. Came down from Indianapolis, they offloaded it, and the guy who bought it, John Roach, drove it around downtown Louisville on October 4th, 1898. By the way, this was an electric car. My, how times have changed. We're going back to electric cars now. But back there in 1898, 133 years or so ago, we had electric cars, and this was a horseless carriage. By 1908, 10 years later, we had over 400 of these contraptions roaming around Louisville. And one of them was bought by William Richardson Belknap. Now, that's not him in this horseless carriage, but I just use this as an illustration. But William Richardson Belknap and all the wealthy Louisvillians were able to get their cars and get out of downtown. They decided to move out to the suburbs and build a house away from the city.
How'd that horseless carriage work?
It was battery powered. It had a little battery in it. Yeah, it was battery powered, electric. And so Belknap, William Richardson Belknap, built this magnificent mansion in the Glenview neighborhood, 6100 Longview Avenue. Look at that. So yeah, he built a huge house there and built it in, what, 1905. So yeah, the wealthy Louisvillians did not need to live near where they worked anymore. They had an automobile and they could drive wherever they wanted to. So from the mid-1900s to the late 1900s, Old Louisville started to decline because all the wealthy who built these beautiful mansions said, hey, we don't need to live here anymore, we're going to move out. And then the people that moved into those big mansions weren't able to afford to keep them up or maintain them. And so those big mansions started to decline because it takes a lot of money to keep those mansions updated. And so instead of single family ownership, they became tenants. They were broken up into apartments. And it really started to decline the Old Louisville neighborhood. However, Old Louisville has made a tremendous comeback since the mid-1900s. By the 1970s, people were saying, hey, we need to save some of these buildings, we should not tear them down. By the 1980s, people started to move back into Old Louisville. Now, a lot of wealthy folks, especially from the California area, from California, they move into Old Louisville and they say, gosh, we can buy these things for $1 million. Whereas in California, they're spending multiple millions for those homes. But so they move into here in the Old Louisville neighborhood and they fix them up and they are spectacular. They've done a wonderful job and this area has really come back now. So here's a historic marker that they put up on the St. James Court talking about the revitalization movement. And a lot of it had to do with the St. James Art Fair, which started there, or art show, which started in the mid-1950s, and it really has become, as it says, one of the nation's largest art shows in the country. And still just a lot of these beautiful mansions have been restored. Here are a couple of examples. These are what we call the French Chateauesque houses. They're on 4th and Belgravia Court. They were built by the same architect and the same owner. So architect F.W. Mowbray designed them, and Joseph Warren Jr. Owned them. The Warren family lived in this huge Chateauesque home that's in the lower right-hand corner, and he had, I think it was 4 daughters, and he built these 4 houses for each of his daughters. And if you see in the upper right-hand corner there, you kind of see part of this Chateauesque house, which is on the other side there. So isn't those spectacular? Mm-hmm. They still exist. They're in good shape. And one of my architect friends owned one of them a while back and got to go inside. It's just beautiful, these homes. More Clark and Loomis homes. This was for a former governor of Kentucky, Augustus Wilson. And I know the owners of this house. I've been inside it numerous times. Just, oh, they don't make them like this anymore. Look at that staircase. Mm-hmm. This is what we call the Bishop Hat House. Yes, you have a question?
I'm Donna Mullaney, and I'm almost blind. I'm blind in one eye. I'm wondering if there are any seats up closer to the screen.
Yes, there is. There's a seat up close. You can come right up. If someone could help her, maybe sit right over here.
I can see the tables and
yeah, there's
the
one.
walker.
I'll help you. Come on up. Here, you go grab my hand. There you go. And then I'm going to lead you over this way.
Okay.
I'll put your hand on the table, and there's a chair just to the. There you go. You got it.
Thank you.
Good deal. And if you have any questions as I go through the presentation, please raise your hand and I can answer them accordingly, just like that. So this is called the Bishop Hat House. Very beautiful house. They're pretty much near 3rd Street and Magnolia in the Old Louisville neighborhood. And I note the date there, July 2025, because a few years earlier this happened. They had a major fire at the Bishop Hat House, June 19th, 2020, and you can see in the lower left-hand corner how much it was damaged. And they just finished restoring it. And it's called the Bishop Hat House because, as you see there in the center, the right-hand side of the facade looks like a bishop's hat. Nothing more technical than that. But anyways, we were so glad that the owners were able to restore it and get it back to excellent condition. It's a beautiful home. Here are some more distinctive homes in the Old Louisville area. I mean, you can go street after street in Old Louisville and they are just, yeah, your jaw is agape. They are just so phenomenal.
Beautiful.
These are the DuPont family homes. I already talked to you about Biederman DuPont. He lived in a house in the Central Park area. He had other relatives here, other DuPont family members, and these were some of the homes that they lived in.
There was a DuPont that lived in the house that was on Central Park,
Right,
right in the middle of Central Park.
and that was Biederman DuPont.
Yeah.
Biederman. This is the, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other, besides just residential homes, some of the other institutions and buildings in the neighborhood. The Cabbage Patch Settlement House is there on 6th Street, just on the west side of St. James Court. And it provides social services of a variety of nature for families and for teenagers, after-school care, things like that. There was even a movie with W.C. Fields that talked about Cabbage Patch. But there in the upper right-hand corner is a historic marker that talks about the founding of it by, what was her name, Louise Marshall, I think. Yeah, I see her name there. Louise Marshall helped start Cabbage Patch back in 1910. And back in those days, it was for children that didn't have a support group. Maybe their mother and father, maybe they were orphaned or whatever. But nowadays, it serves after-school care and other things in support of families there in the Cabbage Patch area. Another institution in the Old Louisville area is the Women's Club of Louisville. Major headquarters there near Central Park on 4th Street. It was founded by Susan Look Avery back in 1890, and hopefully everyone, especially the women, know who Susan Look Avery is. She helped Susan B. Anthony with the national suffrage, get out the voting, the women's right to vote effort. And Susan Look Avery was a major factor in Susan B. Anthony's campaign to get the right to vote. So, but Susan Look Avery started the Women's Club here. She started it at her house, which was located at 4th and Broadway at the time. And then they were able to build this great clubhouse back here. I think they built this back in the 1920s. Some other institutions in Old Louisville are these beautiful churches. Old Louisville has some phenomenal churches. This is Calvary Episcopal Church. Got a little historical marker up there in the upper right-hand corner. I think the windows, the stained glass windows in this church were designed by the Tiffany Company out of New York City. Very famous windows, stained glass windows of this church. It's just spectacular if you ever have a chance to go inside it. Another great church is this one here, the 4th Avenue Methodist Church at St. Catherine and 4th Street. I've actually not been inside this church, which I'm not sure why. I've never been inside it, but it's beautiful, I'm sure, on the interior, and it's a massive, also designed by William Dodd, who I spoke about earlier. This is a phenomenal church. This is Emmanuel Baptist Church, 854th. I think it's at near either Kentucky or Breckenridge Streets and 4th Avenue. Anyways, this church was in very poor condition. The interior, everything, I should have put a before and after photograph here. You see what it looks like now. But it was really deteriorated. In fact, we all felt it could easily be demolished and torn down. But back in the around 2017, 2018 or so, the congregation came together and they funded a massive restoration of it. And it's jaw-dropping, the interior of this church. And as you can see there, phenomenal. This is St. Louis Bertrand Catholic Church. It likewise is phenomenal. It's there on the western part of Old Louisville neighborhood. And while it indicates that another architect designed it, I think it was either designed by or at least designed in a manner of an architect by the name of William Keeley. William Keeley did our cathedral in downtown Louisville, and William and his brother Patrick Keeley designed a similar church of this up in the Boston area. So I think that the Keeleys were very involved in the design of St. Louis Bertrand, even though another architect is mentioned as the architect. Anyways, that's another story. Other things that they do in the Old Louisville area is they have Shakespeare in Central Park. They have performances there almost every weekend during the summer of some Shakespearean play. I've been to some of those. It is outdoors, so it does get a little hot and humid, but the performances are phenomenal and draws large crowds to the Central Park area of Old Louisville. And last but not least, I want to talk about the St. James Court Art Show. Most Louisvillians, even and nationally, know of Old Louisville due to the St. James Art Show. And as noted earlier, it was started back in the 1950s, 70 some odd years ago. And every year it gets bigger and better. My house, I have, the walls are decorated with all sorts of artwork that we purchased at St. James over the years. In fact, so much so that me and my wife don't even go to the art show anymore, because if we go there, we'll buy something, and my wife goes, well, where are you going to put it at? You know, we have to take something down to put something up. Although we do like to go, the best time to go to the St. James Art Show is early Sunday mornings. When other people are at church, you can go down there and find an easy parking spot around 9:30. It's supposed to open around, I think, 10 a.m. or so. But if you get there about 9:30, the artists are already set up. They're having their coffee. You can walk around nice and relaxed, and then find out what you'd like to buy, and do that and be out of there by 12 noon when all the riffraff or the other people are coming in. Yeah, by 12 noon on a Sunday, it is wall-to-wall people, and you're getting ready to leave. You've got your artwork and you're out of there. So that's the best time we have found to go to the St. James Art Show, is early Sunday morning. I really shouldn't say that, because now other people will start doing that. But we love going down to the St. James Art Show, and you can see all the fabulous architecture and the residences there and all the artists. It is just one of the highlights of the year. And it's held the first weekend of October every year. Always the first weekend, the full weekend, that Saturday and Sunday, it would have to be for the St. James Art Show. So that's it. I know we just had a few people that just joined us at the very end. We started at 1:30 today. I'm not sure where everyone was at today.